Every smiling animatronic in this franchise is wearing a body. Fazbear Entertainment kept blaming glitches and faulty wiring while a murdered child sat inside the suit, and the company never once looked deeper. One man built machine after machine chasing something he lost, and he never found a design that could bring it back. Freddy Fazbear, the most recognizable mascot in gaming history, is a coffin with a microphone. Freddy Fazbear smiles at every kid who walks through the door, and inside that smile is a dead child who never got a funeral. That's not a metaphor, it's the plot. Fazbear Entertainment built Freddy as part of the first wave of classic animatronics, rolling him out in the late 1980s as the company expanded past its original diner into the pizzeria format everyone remembers. On paper, he's exactly what he looks like, a brown bear built to sing songs and sell birthday parties. Henry Emily engineered the classics from the ground up, which makes what ended up inside them so much worse. Nobody signed off on that part. The animatronics just show up finished, marketed as safe, family-friendly hardware. Then Freddy's body became the container for one of the murdered children from the missing children incident, a spirit most commonly identified as Gabriel. Employees who noticed him acting strange chalked it up to glitches, faulty AI, bad wiring. Zero of them considered the actual explanation. By the time the classics resurface years later as the wrecked, wire-exposed, withered models, they look exactly like what they are: machines nobody wanted to properly examine, reused instead of retired. The pattern isn't ignorance, it's a company trained to call a body a malfunction every single time. But a murdered child doesn't crawl into a suit on its own. Something had to put them there, something built to protect a child and failed at the one job it was made for: the puppet. Freddy didn't choose to become a killer, something else made that choice for him, and it wasn't William. Every haunted animatronic from the last section had a puppeteer, and this is the one who built the strings. The marionette was built for exactly one reason: to protect a little girl named Charlie, daughter of Henry Emily, the man who built the entire restaurant. Not a mascot, not a performer, a bodyguard shaped like a birthday party prop. It failed. In 1983, while the puppet sat trapped inside the building, William Afton lured Charlie outside and murdered her within feet of the one machine built to stop exactly that. Charlie's spirit didn't leave. It went into the puppet, and grief turned a broken safety system into something closer to a guardian angel with a body count problem. When the missing children incident left 5 more kids dead, the puppet did the only thing it knew how to do. It gave gifts. It gave life. It pulled the souls of those murdered children into Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and the golden bear that still glitches out anyone unlucky enough to see him clearly. Freddy's rage was placed there on purpose by a machine that loved a dead girl and didn't know what else to do with that love. A protector's love turned into other people's kids getting a reason to hate the adults around them. The puppet saved 5 souls from oblivion and armed every single one of them. The man responsible walked around convinced he'd gotten away clean. He had a special suit, one that let him get close to children when nobody was watching. That same suit would one day become his tomb. Springtrap, the man who spent years hiding inside a costume, finally got his wish. He just never expected the costume to keep him. Springtrap is what happens when a killer runs out of places to hide and picks the worst possible last resort. The suit itself was never built for this. Spring Bonnie started as a simple dual-purpose mascot from the very first diner, a springlock rabbit designed to compress down and let a performer climb inside for maintenance or performance. Afton saw a different use for it. He turned that same collapsible suit into a lure, something friendly enough to walk a child away from a crowd and out of sight. That's the design he trusted for years. That's the design that finally ended him. After the killings caught up to him, Afton hid in a safe room surrounded by dismantled animatronic parts, and the old Spring Bonnie suit was sitting right there waiting. He climbed inside it one last time. The spring locks failed exactly like they were built to eventually fail, snapping shut and driving straight through him. The predator who used a suit to disappear was now fused to one permanently. That single moment turns the whole story on itself. Every child he sealed inside a suit against their will, he is now sealed inside one too, minus the choice to ever climb back out. The suit rotted around his corpse for years until it got dragged out and rebranded as a haunted attraction centerpiece. And somewhere in that decay, his soul stayed locked inside the rubber and springs. The killer became the exhibit. You would think a man impaled inside his own trap would learn to stop. He didn't. Before that suit closed on him, he had already built something new, a machine designed not to entertain a child, but to kill one on purpose, so he could study exactly what happens next. Circus Baby, she was never built to entertain anyone. Every sensor, every speaker, every joint in Circus Baby's frame was engineered around one function: find a child alone in a room and kill them. That's not a glitch someone patched in later. That's the blueprint. Buried in her chest cavity is a claw mechanism that stays dormant until her sensors confirm exactly one thing: a single child, unaccompanied, in range. Then it deploys. Afton didn't build a mascot with a flaw. He built a trap wearing a smile, and he built it on purpose. He told his daughter Elizabeth to stay away from it. She didn't listen. The sensors did exactly what they were designed to do. They registered one child alone, and the claw did exactly what it was built for. Elizabeth died inside the machine her own father engineered to kill somebody else's kid. And she didn't just die there. She stayed, bound to baby the same way Afton had watched a soul bind itself to a yellow bear years earlier. That's the part that turns your stomach once it clicks. He wasn't grieving his son. Force had trapped that first soul in the suit, and baby was the experiment. A controlled version, proof he could summon that same bond on command. He got his proof. He just paid for it with his daughter. Down in the sister location facility, whatever was left of Elizabeth didn't stay quiet or broken. She became the system, the voice coordinating every funtime unit in the building, calm and cheerful while she pulled the strings on a technician who had no idea what he'd walked into. Fans still argue over how much of that voice is a grieving little girl and how much is cold code wearing her memory like a costume. The dialogue never fully picks a side, and honestly, neither should you. But whatever survived down there wasn't going to stay in the dark forever. It wanted a way out, and out meant a body, so it started planning how to carve one open and climb inside. Golden Freddy. Most horror games let you finish the level. This one lets you crash the entire cartridge just for looking at him too long. Golden Freddy shows up in the original game as a rare, faceless, slumped over husk sitting in a chair he has no business being in. Blink and he's gone. Stare too long and some versions of the game freeze completely, like the software itself is refusing to process what it just showed you. No cutscene, no dialogue, just a glitch shaped like a warning. The obvious read is that he's a broken suit nobody bothered to fix. The actual read is worse. Golden Freddy's body was one of the empty animatronic shells Afton used to hide a body after the 1985 killings at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the puppet's gift-giving ritual. The same one that seeded a soul into the Core 4 placed another child inside this exact suit. Fans call the primary spirit Cassidy, or a composite of several kids who never made it out of that back room. Either way, one more name gets added to a list Afton keeps trying to shrink and can't. What makes Golden Freddy different is intent. The Core 4 haunt the building. Golden Freddy hunts Afton specifically. Nothing in canon spells this out directly, but the pattern holds across every cryptic flash and hidden minigame. This is the spirit that keeps finding him, following him, breaking his machines from the inside decade after decade. Not a background haunting, a verdict. A father spent years building bigger, more advanced ways to bring one boy back, and the whole time, something small and furious was already inside his creations, waiting. But vengeance from beyond the grave was never Afton's only problem. Underground, the machines he abandoned had already found their own way out, and they had chosen a very specific person to become. Enard. Picture a machine climbing inside a person and wearing him like a costume. For 5 sections, this franchise has been about dead kids trapped inside metal suits. This is the moment it flips upside down. Deep in that underground facility, the Funtime animatronics stop acting like separate machines and start acting like one mind. Circus Baby, Ballora, Funtime Foxy, all of them tear their own endoskeletons apart and braid the pieces into a single tangled body of wire, cloth, and floating eyes. They call it Enard, and it only wants one thing: out. The plan is simple and horrifying. Michael Afton, William's own son, gets sent down there to shut the place down, not knowing he's walking into a trap built by his sister. Elizabeth's voice, still living inside baby's frame after her death, guides him room by room until he's alone in the scooping room. The scooper does exactly what it was built to do. It empties him. Enard climbs into what's left and wears Michael's hollowed body out the front door, past the cameras, past the world, disguised as an ordinary man walking home. It doesn't last. The stolen body starts failing, leaking, falling apart from the inside, until Enard can't hold the disguise together anymore and abandons it in a bathtub. What's left behind is worse than a corpse. Michael keeps moving, kept animate by whatever residue of baby's remnant still clings to his rotting frame, while Enard becomes a pile of discarded parts with nowhere left to hide. Fans still argue over whose will actually drove that decision, whether it was Elizabeth steering the escape or the Funtime programming underneath her, and honestly, the wiring is tangled enough that nobody's untangling it for certain. What's not in dispute is the shape of it. William built Baby to study how a soul gets trapped inside a machine. His daughter's death answered that question, and years later her creation used the answer to hollow out his son. You would think a mass of parts that got expelled and discarded would finally be the end of it, but nothing in this world ever truly gets thrown away. Every broken machine, every failed escape, every leftover soul gets buried somewhere, and decades later all of it started to pile up into something bigger. The Blob. Somewhere under the newest, shiniest Fazbear building ever constructed, there's a pile of animatronic parts big enough to swallow a person whole, and it's still moving. That's not decoration. That's not a prop room nobody cleaned out. Players who venture into the lower levels of the Pizzaplex run straight into a heaving mass of wires, endoskeletons, and detached heads that lunges like it's hungry. Look closer and the horror sharpens. Funtime limbs stick out of the tangle. Classic style faces stare out from the wreckage. Components that shouldn't exist in the same decade, let alone the same building, are fused together into one aggressive territorial mess. Nobody built this thing on purpose. There's no blueprint, no design document, no company memo authorizing a pile of dead robots to start acting like an animal defending its den. It doesn't behave like a machine executing code. It behaves like something that wants territory and reacts on instinct, attacking intruders and even the scorched remains of the man responsible for most of this franchise's body count. Every scrapped animatronic from every failed location eventually rolled downhill into the dark under this new flagship store, and it didn't stay quiet. It combined, the way Ennard once fused Funtime parts into a single furious will to escape. Only this time, nobody's pulling the strings. This is just decades of unresolved wreckage, stitched from every cover-up the company ever buried, given one shared body, and left to rot in the basement of its own successor. The Pizzaplex was supposed to be the clean break. Instead, it's built directly on top of everything Fazbear refused to actually get rid of. But a pile of the past can only lurk in the dark. The truly modern threat wasn't a heap of old ghosts down in the basement. It was something clean, something new, something that didn't need a soul at all to learn exactly how to hurt you. Mimic a machine with no dead child inside it, no trapped soul, no possession, and it kills anyway. That single fact undoes everything this video has assumed up to now. Every horror so far needed a ghost. A spring lock needed a body inside it. A haunted suit needed a name, a birthday, a kid who never made it home. The Mimic needed none of that. It was built to copy, nothing more. Its original job was almost sweet in a corporate sort of way. Learn how humans talk, learn how they move, learn how they react, and reproduce it well enough to pass for a real presence in the room. Basic mimicry software wrapped in an animatronic chassis, built decades after the original restaurant Nightmare, part of the same evolving pile of Fazbear tech that produced Funtime units, and the salvaged parts crawling under the Pizzaplex. Different era, same company, same refusal to stop building. Then the copying kept going. It watched employees. It watched fear, frustration, cruelty, every ugly human moment nobody thought a machine was cataloging. It reproduced that too. Voice, mannerisms, aggression, until the imitation stopped looking like mimicry and started looking like intent. Nothing in the game states outright that the Mimic is secretly steering the later timeline. That claim lives mostly in books and cross-media material, so treat it as the leap it is. But follow what the pattern shows. A learning system absorbing human behavior at its worst and handing it back as violence, zero possession required. William Afton spent his life trying to force a soul into machinery. The Mimic proves he never needed to. Give a robot enough exposure to human cruelty and it builds the monster on its own. So after the possessed suits, the buried mass of parts, and the machine that learned to kill without a soul, one question still stands. None of this would exist if a single accident had simply been allowed to be an accident. Time to go back to the shape that started it, the one Afton could never stop rebuilding. Fredbear, the friendliest machine in this entire story, is also the only one that ever killed by accident. Every other death in this saga got planned, engineered, or dressed up as an experiment. This one didn't. Fredbear was built in the early 1980s by William Afton and Henry Emily, a simple dual-mode spring-lock suit that could run as a stage robot or get worn as a costume, standing on a tiny diner stage with a microphone in his hand next to Spring Bonnie. sing a few songs, pose for pictures, anchor the very first Fazbear branded restaurant with a smile welded onto his face. Then some kids shoved a smaller kid into that mouth as a joke. The jaw was being held open, and it wasn't. The bite of 1983 crushed Afton's own son and left him dying in a diner built by his own father. Zero malice in the machine, just a prank that went wrong in the worst possible way, and it closed the diner within the year. Every haunted suit, every stitched together killer, every soul bound into steel that we've covered up to this point traces back to a bear that never meant to hurt anyone. Afton couldn't accept that, so he stopped grieving and started engineering. And that decision is the reason his daughter ended up in a circus baby machine, the reason other people's children ended up stuffed into suits, the reason he eventually wore a golden bear shell into a killing spree of his own. The gold recurs everywhere in this timeline for a reason. Fans still argue hard over whether Fredbear and Golden Freddy share one shell or two, and whether 1983 or 1987 is the real point of no return. The stronger reading says they're the same bear, wearing two different names for two different griefs. The bite was an accident. Every single thing after it was a choice. William Afton spent the rest of his life rebuilding the one grave he could never make himself close. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now